Today, we are diving into the really complex and honestly ever-changing stories of four absolute legends in the music world. We've got new information dropping that is forcing all of us to kind of re-examine what we think we know about fame, legacy, and, well, the truth itself in this wild digital age. So what's on the agenda today? First up, we're going to dig into a brand new documentary that has unheard audio from Michael Jackson. Then we're going to unpack the recent mentions of Jay-Z and Pusha T in the Epstein files and what that actually means. And finally, we'll look at how all of this stands in stark contrast to the celebrated and pretty much untouchable legacy of Diana Ross. All right, let's kick things off with Michael Jackson. There's a new documentary that just came out in the UK, and it is making some serious waves. And it's all because it features audio from the king of pop himself that the public has never, ever heard before. So this is a 4-part series, and it's built around these recordings from conversations Jackson had, with his inner circle, years before his big trial in 2005. The whole point is to use this audio to explore his life, that insane media frenzy that was always around him, and the bigger, more complex issues of fame and justice. It's trying to give a whole new perspective on one of the most polarizing trials in modern history. And this quote gives you a real taste of how personal these reflections are. In one of the clips, Jackson talks about his connection with kids, saying things like, "They just want to touch me, hug me." And then he says this, acknowledging that the very thing he's describing could and did lead to trouble. It's a pretty startlingly direct window into his mindset at the time. Okay, and this part is absolutely critical to understand. The audio gives us a ton of insight into his personal thoughts, his struggles. But, and this is so important, it does not provide any new legal evidence. Let me say that again. It doesn't change the fact that he was acquitted of all charges back in 2005. That's a historical fact. All right, let's pivot now. We're going to shift from re-examining history through old audio to a very modern and very tricky challenge. How do we deal with the release of raw, totally unverified data? Which brings us to the Epstein files. So yeah, as part of the ongoing release of documents from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, the names of Sean Carter, who we all know as Jay-Z, and the rapper Pusha T have popped up. And specifically, they appeared in what are called raw FBI intake reports and submissions to public tip lines. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, we have to be crystal clear on what a raw tip file actually is. Like it says right here, this is not evidence. It's basically a digital folder of unverified, often anonymous tips that people send to the police. Being named in one of these means literally nothing in a court of law. It is not the same as being investigated, charged, or found guilty of anything. And this is exactly why legal experts are practically screaming for people to be cautious. In this age of massive data dumps, it is so easy for a name to get caught up in a social media firestorm without any context. We're talking about unverified third-party claims, not proven facts. It's a huge reminder of just how important it is to be smart about the information we consume. Okay, now for a complete 180, a total shift in the story. Because while some of these legacies are being picked apart and questioned, there's another icon whose story is just one of consistent, ongoing celebration. Let's talk about the one and only Diana Ross. I mean, the Queen of Motown is such a fascinating contrast, isn't she? Her recent headlines aren't about digging up a troubled past or trying to make sense of raw data. No, they're about her incredible, enduring status, like when she headlined the New Year's Rockin' Eve show in Times Square. And this timeline just puts her insane longevity into perspective. I mean, from fronting the Supremes, literally one of the most successful groups of all time, to a solo career that basically defined entire decades of pop music, to still being a major headliner today, her legacy isn't something that's being debated, it's being actively celebrated on the biggest stages in the world. So, you might be wondering, why do we look at these three very different stories altogether? Well, because when you put them side by side, they paint this incredibly vivid picture of how fame and legacy are built, how they're challenged, and how they survive right now, in this moment. What we're really seeing here is this collision of public memory, the way the media frames things, and the power of new information. But even more important, it's about the type of information we're getting and how that changes everything. Each of these legacies is being shaped by a totally different kind of data. This table just lays it all out. For Michael Jackson, we get his own words, his own emotions on tape. It doesn't change the legal outcome, but it definitely invites us to re-examine a really complex past on an emotional level. Then you've got Jay-Z and Pusha T, where the information is just raw, impersonal data. It forces us to be intellectually cautious and really highlights the danger of getting accused by association online. And then there's Diana Ross, where the information is her continued success, which just keeps reinforcing her celebrated status in real time.
So the real takeaway here is this. Legacies are not set in stone. They aren't monuments. They're living, breathing things that change and evolve as new information comes out and old stories get looked at through a new lens.
And that kind of leaves us with a really big question, right? When you're scrolling and you see new, sometimes shocking information about a famous person, how do you even begin to process it? How do you balance those new revelations with the facts we already know to get a full picture? That's the challenge for all of us in this information age.